everybody. Welcome back to the Malaysians on the Move podcast. Today with me, I have Dhiren Doshi, or for me, Uncle Dhiren, who is actually my mom's relative. My mom's going to kill me because I don't know. It's either you are her nephew or her uncle or her cousin, one of those. But yeah, very happy to talk to you, Uncle Dhiren. You are based in the US and you've been here for many decades. And I would just learn to love a little bit more about your growing up days in Malaysia and how you ended up here.
Hi, Yoshnee. Thank you for the invite. It's my pleasure to be here. Um, I would say that your granddad was my father's uncle, so your mom is probably my auntie. So here we go. I think a little bit about my background. I was born and grew up in Kuala Lumpur. Our family had a business on Mountbatten Road, which is now, I'm not even sure, Tun Perak, maybe that's the name of the street. And we were fortunate to grow up in that area. Went to school in Batu Road School during the time that that entire road in Jalan Abdul Rahman was a vacant plot, and Odeon Theatre was probably the big signpost there. And from Batu Road School, I went to Stapak High School. I'm one of those who quit school before the MCE exam so that I could study on my own at home or do less studying at home. Let's put it that way. And went on to Taylor's College. And from Taylor's College, I had an option to go either to Australia or to the UK. And at that time, families tended to view UK more favorably. So I went out to Leeds and did my engineering degree there before returning to Malaysia. Growing up, I think in Kuala Lumpur, you had a lot of opportunity to move around freely. You could go out bicycling, you could fly kites, you could do simple things. Frequently go out to Port Dickson. We grew up in a joint family in one building which had four apartments. So 10 cousins grew up in the same compound, so we had our own playmates. It ended up being two boys, two girls, two boys, two girls, and two boys. So everyone had their partner, which was within a year or two of their age. And so it was quite an interesting time for us. We had lots to do as we were growing up.
I also grew up with a lot of cousins, and we all lived like 10 minutes apart. So it was really easy
Right?
to,
Hmm.
yeah. And what you said about having people your age and playmates and all that, yeah, I really miss those days sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, when you were in Leeds, did you think at the time that, oh, like I would love to live here and, try to get work experience overseas? Or were you like, okay, I'm just going to go back to Malaysia?
I think my situation, Yoshni, was a little different in the sense that my father was of poor health. So
Oh,
it was always clear to me that I would go back to Malaysia. Now, even though I backpacked and traveled all over Europe, all over the US, where as a student, I did 12,000 miles on the Greyhound bus. When I was 20 years old, I did 2 months backpacking at 20 pounds a day. Yeah, 720 pounds is what I spent in 2 months in backpacking in Europe. So, but I always knew I would go back to Malaysia.
oh my God, that is so fun. This is like so many years ago, too, like in the 80s or.
It was exactly 1980 when I did my backpack tour in the US. Spent 12 weeks here. I worked on Fifth Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Street on a soup restaurant on Fifth Avenue. And then I traveled for 4 weeks in the Greyhound
Oh my God. And from the Greyhound, you just hop from city to city across the
from city
US.
to city and met people and traveled with them and did different things. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's really brave of you, I must say.
It's always been like that.
Okay. So then, like you said, you knew you had to go back to Malaysia. I'm assuming that's when you started your career in Malaysia after you
Right.
got back.
Right. It was an interesting time in '82. Um, I had gone to KL in back in September and very quickly managed to get a job with Western Digital, And that was by early December. I had gotten my job, and I was going to start in January, February, when the entire world suffered a recessionary period. And so the people at Western Digital said to me, "You can come to work, but we're laying off a lot of people.
Okay.
So you're just going to get laid off." So I never started with them. And then I found a job with an Indian Malaysian joint venture in Shah Alam. Worked there for a while before I moved up to Penang. And then from Penang, after a few years of living in Penang, 6, 7 years, I moved back to KL and eventually joined Colgate Palmolive in 1989. And then that my career stayed with them for 32 years.
Right, right. And so eventually, when you decide to move to the United States, you essentially transfer to the American branch.
Yeah, so way it worked at that time, I had been working in Malaysia, doing certain work in the region, had met people who knew of my work and was invited to come out to the US. So Colgate had sponsored me to come out to the US. They and that's so it was a transfer.
Okay.
In American companies, when you come to the US, it's called an inpatriate program, not an expatriate program. So you basically normalize to the US structures and benefit system.
And they also agree to bring over your family, right?
Correct. Yeah, we get all the benefits of, me and the wife coming over for a look-see visit, bring the whole family across, your personal belongings, whatever you wanted to bring. And it really facilitates your transfer. It was probably something that was extremely easy for us because we were given accommodation. The moment we landed, we had a place to stay, a car was available. They took us around. They had a person assigned to orient us to the area, take us to get social security numbers.
Yeah.
Which is when we found out that actually I had a social security number from 1980 when I came here.
Makes sense
Um,
because you work in the soup kitchen.
in the soup kitchen, yeah. And then I had gone to would help you open a bank account, purchase a car, those decisions, and then help you go look for a home and buy a home at the right time, right? It was also a year when property transactions were very quick. When a property came up for sale in the morning, by evening it would have 6 to 7 offers.
Oh,
So it took us much longer to find a home. But eventually we did. We found a home that was just the right size for us, and moved there in a town called Hillsborough, New Jersey.
yep, yep. Definitely, that's very supportive of a company to do all of this. I think nowadays, like they just give you like a relocation amount and then you kind of spend it yourself, but you have to self organize.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the size of the company and type of company, but without the kind of support that we had, it would have been really a sticker shock. So I'll give you an example. We arrived in mid-morning, lunchtime, and went into our apartment. We're tired. We fell asleep.
Mhm.
We woke up. By the time we woke up, it was the dead of winter, February, and it was dark outside. So we all wanted to go eat. So we went to eat something. So we need to buy some things for breakfast tomorrow morning. And we went to the supermarket and we bought for 80 US dollars what would have been purchased in Malaysia for 60 ringgit. And you get this huge sticker shock. And then that's when you realize that when you move with a company that provides you relocation allowances for the first few months, in addition to your normal pay, all of that makes the transition very easy. They take the kids to the school, get them admitted. So within a week, the kids were in school and they were comfortable. So it made it a lot easier for us that way.
Yeah. And so when you came here, did you know that this was going to be like a permanent move or you thought it would be like a 3, 4 year thing?
I think the kind of program that I came in, it was meant to be a long term move.
Oh,
Now, the question was at that time as to whether that translates into permanent residency, how quickly it translates into permanent residency, was a still open question, which was resolved very easily. We came here in 2000, and by 2001, the company applied for my permanent residency. At that time, there was a issue with people working in this country. And if something happened, and I was traveling up to 90 days a year all over the world, and if something happened to me, what would happen to the family? And given that the kids were already in English schools, English speaking schools, for them to transition back to Malaysia would have been very difficult.
yes.
So that's what, when we brought this question up to the company, they said, okay, what's the, and there was the issue of taxes, because if something happened to me, the plane fell out of the sky, 50% of our wealth gets stuck in this country. So there were all kinds of rules at that time that made it very meaningful for the company to apply for the green card.
Okay, so basically, you were very committed. You were like, yeah, I'm making this move, it's long term.
Yep.
Did you have any difficulty coming to that decision? Like before, obviously, boarding the flight, you already decided, but were there like topics that you had to discuss with your family?
I think it wasn't, Yoshni, because there were some real career limitations in Malaysia. I think there was a conversation with the senior vice president of the division as to what position I would have been given had I maybe had a different orientation, in Malaysia. Um, and so I was missing out on certain opportunities, and that clearly told me that if I was going to stay in Malaysia, and I enjoyed working with Colgate, there were going to be limitations as to what I could do and grow. And so when this offer came by, actually the offer had come a year earlier, but the division had prevented me from leaving Malaysia.
Oh,
So back in 1998, that had happened, and the division leadership said no, he can't go, and this was not the Malaysia division, but the region in Asia. And so when the offer came again in '99, at the end, it was a very easy decision for us to make.
that's lovely. That's lovely. And I know when you got here, the company made it easy for you guys to essentially
Hmm.
get accommodated, and
Hmm.
like your kids went to school within a week. But how did you guys transition with building a community, making new friends? How was that like for you back in 2000?
So I would answer the question in two ways, right? One, both of us are very comfortable being social in a multi cultural environment. So we could meet with anybody from anywhere in the world and we'll be comfortable. So the kind of home we bought intentionally was one which had neighbors close by, and we made very good friends with all of our neighbors. That was
Got it.
easy part. The part that was really difficult was getting assimilated within the South Asian Indian community.
Okay.
And I think this was a lesson for us because we Malaysian Indians are not necessarily viewed as real Indians by Indians from India. And being a Gujarati, I think we have a lot of Gujaratis in Hillsborough. And one of the things we realized that we would keep throwing parties and inviting people to come over to our house. Or sometimes we would never get invited back, or we might get invited once back to somebody's house. And we realized very quickly that most of the Gujarati Indians who in the Hillsborough area can speak about, they all had what they call a group of 10.
Okay.
They had a group of 10 families that either came from the same town, the same school, the same village, same background. And these 10 families visited each other's families once a month, with the exception of Thanksgiving and Christmas,
Got it.
right? And so they were very much comfortable with their own groups. They've been having those groups for a while. So you could not penetrate any one of these groups.
Right.
And I think and I, especially having never lived in India, I don't speak Gujarati as fluently as them. I don't understand the jokes. I don't sing the same songs. I don't do all the Bollywood songs and all of that. So we're just viewed as being very different.
Okay.
And that was how it was for us from 2000 all the way to 2012. So after a while of doing that, while we had a few, maybe less than four, South Asian, Gujarati, Indian friends, besides our other friends, we did not make any serious attempt to form new friends around that area. And in 2013, we moved into an active adult community
Yes.
15 miles away. It's close to Princeton in New Jersey. It's a community with about 360 homes here. Right now, we have close to between 80 and 100 South Asian families. When we came to this community, the way we were embraced by the Indian and South Asian community was a completely opposite experience to what we had in the first 12 years.
Interesting.
Very different from the point of view, you have a much older population, people are over 55 and maybe 60 and more. They are coming to this type of community with the view of wanting to have bonds and connections with people.
Yeah.
They are all typically past the point of time where they're worried about kids going through school and college, so their focus is different. And this community has been a godsend for us. we
Yeah.
we cannot thank our stars enough, we cannot thank our blessings enough that we've been brought to this kind of community where we have connection with not just South Asian community, but a cross section of the American demographic. Yeah,
Yeah. No, it's I'm so glad that you shared that because it is true what you said. As an Indian Malaysian myself, we are somewhat different from Indians that are born and raised in India because we are Malaysian. There are things about being Malaysian that is not applicable if you're from
absolutely,
and born in
absolutely.
India, right? So
And
I can resonate with what you said.
and our sons both say it to us very clearly: we're not Indians, we're Malaysians.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I also wanted to say that it's very inspirational what you said about finding a community in your later age
yeah,
because I've read a lot about people struggling to find community when they're older because they spend a lot of their lives in a career and like taking care of their children, and then when they become empty nesters, everybody
yeah.
moves away and then they're alone.
Right.
So it's this kind of thing. Like I think there's been a lot of research on the importance of community throughout your life.
Absolutely. And one of the things that they say is if you're thinking about retiring somewhere, go there 5 years before you actually retire, so that
Oh,
you're already in the community. And we were fortunate, right? We came here and I was still working and all of that. So it was very good.
so you are retired now.
I am now very close to being, I had retired. I started some consulting work, but I'm getting to the point of wanting to do nothing.
Got it. Are
Hmm.
you able to share any takeaways from working at one corporation for 3 decades? You said 32 years. What I'm finding in my generation is that we job hop and move around and
Correct. I think there are both upsides and downsides to working in a place for a very long time. The upside is that you understand how things happen, you progress, you build a reputation. If you get the right recognition, it helps you move forward. The downside might be that you may not be challenging yourself enough.
yes, well said.
I think that you may get to a comfort level that you then say, do I really want to move and pick up a new challenge? I think in today's world, you do need to move. You do
Okay.
need to have maybe 4 to 5 different experiences before you get to a point, maybe, and I'm just my perspective, that your last 10 to 15 years might be in a place where you are really contributing as opposed to learning. I would say that
Mm,
when we are early in career, um, even though I came here at the age of 40, I was traveling, within a week of coming here, I was going out to a factory in Ohio, working with people two and a half times my size, and giving direction about how things should be done, building programs, building learning programs, etc. But you're still learning. But I think you come to the point where somewhere at a point in time in your career, and it happens differently for different people, the amount you're giving back in terms of what you're able to direct and influence and create a vision about how things ought to be is exponentially larger, or higher than what you're learning, right? So that's the difference. So I give you an example. When I came back, when I was in Malaysia in 1997, with Colgate, we ran the first strategic labor relations workshop, a pilot of the workshop in Malaysia. And then from that point of time, I was very involved with that process, strategic labor relations, helping run workshops, etc. But it wasn't till about 2007 or 8 when I was able to take all of my experience and redesign that entire workshop
I see.
into a strategic capabilities workshop, and then go out and roll that out 60 times around the world.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the kind of, I think. So you continue to learn, but at some point of time, you can start to see a big change happen, and I'd say that's my reflection.
Yeah, that's really good advice. What you said about the learning versus contributing kind of
Yeah,
intersection,
yeah.
that's really when I think young people like myself sometimes feel that we want to learn more.
Mhm.
So it's time to move on.
That will give you, changing the environment and the company give and different kinds of roles will give you that opportunity.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you were doing a little bit of consulting. Was that just to like keep yourself active post retirement?
It so happened that a few weeks before I retired, one of my very good friends, an ex-colleague from Colgate, called and said, "Do you have people who can do this kind of work?" And so that led to another. I had already been thinking. I had registered the name of the company even while I was working, but thinking about doing something, and I've been doing that now nearly 4 years. So at some point in time, it'll come to an end.
Yeah, that makes sense. Throughout your time in the US, were you able to visit Malaysia much? To visit, all your cousins, the eight, nine of you
Yep,
guys?
yep, yep. We were fortunate to have travel back home trips given to us for at least two times in the first 3 to 4 years, and then we've been going consistently. But I tend to go back every 2, 3 years, maybe. I at least make a trip back home for something or other. Yeah,
Understood, understood. I had brought up your RV in the beginning.
right.
You want to share a little bit about your experience and where you drove with it or where you traveled with it?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is about me is that I want to have different experiences,
Okay.
and that means that I'm always looking for next things to do. So one of the things, as you know, back in our time in Malaysia, although things have changed now, RVs were not a phenomena. Although I now see people having converted vans and things like that. So I wanted to buy a RV, but I also, living in this community, I could not have an RV that is parked outside the garage. So we bought an RV that actually fits inside the garage. It has a double bed, a single bed, it's fully equipped. And we bought it from Canada in 2017. We've traveled a lot in the Northeast, all the way from Canada down to Virginia area. And then last year, I took it on about a 3,500 mile trip with a friend of mine from Australia. One of my best friends I grew up with lived in
Oh,
Australia, so lives in Perth, and I said, "Yo, why didn't you come over? We'll go out on a trip." And my goal was to have this big trip. I was actually going to go for an even bigger around the USA trip in 2021 when I retired from Colgate, but my mother was not well, and so I had to cancel that trip. And so the goal, and so we did all this traveling to vineyards and cities and parks and all of that last year. And the goal at the end of last year, sometime last year, was to sell it. So I finished my learning process of learning how to own, use, park, manage a RV, and I feel I have had that experience. So I'm kind of sold that last year, and I'm looking for my next experience.
That's awesome. Would you say that the trip that you took with your friend from Australia is the most memorable trip you've done with the RV?
I think there are other trips I've done with my wife which are just as memorable. We've gone to lake centers in Lake George in New York, which we just feel are just so satisfying. Saratoga, we've been up there; it's beautiful. So there are many trips, but this was the most varied trip because we went to, in Asheville, we parked the camper in a place that was completely washed out with the last hurricane that came through. So we've got a lot of memories from that trip. We met a couple who, the man and his sister, the man's son-in-law was the original MacGyver on TV show, which you wouldn't remember, but your mom would. The woman was Sharon Stone's producer for 24 years, and they own a vineyard which made fantastic wine. So we had lots of experience.
Yeah, that's so fun. It also like it really probably gave you the freedom to just like travel in quotes anywhere because you don't have to
Absolutely.
find accommodation and you
Correct.
can really just like park near like the most serene place ever, right?
Do what your heart makes your heart sing.
Yeah. You've always had that adventurous spark from the like
Mhm.
Greyhound buses across the US to driving your own RV across the
Seems like
US.
that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So now that we're approaching the end, I usually like to end by asking the golden question, which is, will you ever consider moving back to Malaysia someday?
Well, can we drop the temperature by a few degrees there? So that would be a big question. I think I don't do very well with heat anymore and humidity.
Oh,
Um, I really do enjoy the four seasons. So what they say never.
yes.
At the moment, there are no plans to go there. But I think the idea of spending more time in Malaysia or anywhere else in other places is not a bad one. There are things which we will always miss and cherish about Malaysia, starting with the food. When you get to the plane at the airport in Newark, you're already making plans where you want to eat when you land. But then family is here, so we don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, because your sons are established here, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Any closing remarks for Malaysians or anybody that want to make the move and, carve a new path abroad?
I think there is something about us, whether we're Malaysians, and I think even in Singaporeans, that is truly unique. We are different from, say, someone from Thailand that primarily speaks Thai, and then English. We tend to do pretty well assimilating into other cultures, other environments, etc. So I think the word to Malaysians that might be thinking about that is that there is a wide world out there that you could go explore and take advantage of. Either being in Malaysia and being a global entity or going outside of Malaysia.
Yeah, that's such great advice, and it can be a lot sometimes to make the move because, like you said, there will be things that we cherish and leave behind in Malaysia. So it's not always an easy decision, but I think you have a very inspiring story, and it feels like you committed to it from the beginning, and then you really just carved a life for yourself out here.
Thank you. Thank you, Yoshni.
Yeah, thank you, Uncle Dhiren.
My pleasure.